Hello all you super alidocious people of the internet, hope you're all doing splendidly. Today we're starting a new project and be doing a bit of work on my AU Falcon, turning it into a sort of kind of sleeper that's not really that fast, but will be some kind of a build which will make content, I guess. So let me bring the thing forward and I'll show you a bit about this car and what the plan is moving forward. So for those of you that don't know, this is my Series 2 AU Falcon Forte. I did a little bit of a video on this. We bought this thing, had been sitting for about 5 years. We picked it up, we got it running, fixed up a whole bunch of stuff on it, and we've actually got the car roadworthy now. So it has got a current roadworthy and it's actually getting registered this afternoon. If you haven't seen the videos on what we've done on this, just check my channel. You see those videos there. There's a couple of episodes on it. Besides from that, the only other things we had to do is we had to put a couple of tires on it because they were out of date. And we forgot to plug the windscreen washer bottle back in, so we had to do that. And that headlight had moisture in it, so I've put a second-hand headlight in that front corner, and that was it. But this is basically the car. It's a bog stock AU Falcon. All in all, it's in actually pretty good nick interior-wise. It has done 245,000 Ks. Body-wise is a little bit rough. I'll go over everything in detail in the previous videos. It does have a little bit of rust starting to come out around the spoiler on the boot, which is pretty common. But basically what we're going to be doing is putting this in it. So this is a Barra turbo engine out of a BA. Well, it's a Barra+T with a painted rocker cover. It's running all turbo inlet manifold, fuel pressure regulator, injectors. It was just running standard boost by the time we were done with it. We've also got the BA transmission there. And the plan is basically, so this was in a VT Commodore that had been converted really badly. So the plan is basically we're going to put it in this and get the thing engineered and basically just have it as a bit of an interesting project. So that's basically it. So where to start? Well, there are multiple ways that you can do Barra conversions into AUs. You can use the AU transmission and get a BTR controller. You can use the BA transmission and run it off the BA ECU, which is what we're planning on doing, which in itself creates a couple of issues, a couple of hurdles. You need to get what's called a CAN Barra module to make the factory gauges and stuff work, which we'll get to all of that when we get to it. But basically where we're going to start is in here. So the reason why we're going to start in here is underneath this panel here, there is the fuel pump underneath that. And that's where I'm going to start. Reason being, fuel gauge in this thing actually doesn't work. So it's stuck on a quarter all the time. So if I'm going to be opening up that to do the fuel pump and fuel gauge sender, which is basically this thing here, then I'm also, while I'm at it, I'm going to fit this, which is a Walbro 255 pump. So not really sure how we're going to go about doing this, but let's get this stuff opened and we'll show you a bit more what's going on. That's basically how it looks under the cover. I've just given that a little bit of a quick cleanup. This is the new MRA module with fuel gauge sender. So I think there's an issue with this in the current one, which is why it's not working. And then we've got this fairly largish pump sitting in here, which we're going to change with this one. Even though this is smaller, this does flow more fuel. Oops, it's probably broken now. So we're going to need to change the electrical connector on the end and find out how to make that hose, which is on a 90-degree fitting, fit on the end of this, which is a straight fitting, and make this fit, which is skinnier, into this hole, which is fatter, and all of the good stuff. No idea how we're going to do it, but you'll probably see it right about now. Alrighty, so I got the new one all pulled apart. So the pump sits in this little plastic carrier thing. That's the standard pump. And obviously this is our Walbro replacement. So now I just sort of need to figure out how to get that in there and get it wired up with the new connector and get it plumbed up, I guess. All right, so this is what I've come up with fuel pump wise. It's probably not the best, but it's going to work. So I ended up cutting a small section out of this carrier in here, that part there, and then I've used hose clamps to sandwich it together down onto the pump with the insulator. We've got the pump that came with the Walbro, the sock that came with the Walbro pump on the bottom there, and then the plug that came with it just clips into the top of the pump, a couple of terminals on it, just up here going onto that. And then I've got some submersible fuel hose going from the pump straight up into the outlet. So that should work. So all that's left now is to remove the stock pump out of the tank of this. To do that, we need to try and back this big clamp off that's on the outside, and then we tap this ring around to get it off, take the electrical connector off, take the hoses off, take it out, put the new one in. Got our ring off, got our fuel lines off, got our connector off. So now let's just get this thing out. Like that. Inside the tank looks good. Little magnetic pickup thing in there is clean. So here's our old module here. We'll bang this one in, get it all back together. Boom, it's all back together. All we've got to do is just put a little bit of glue on that cover and stick it back down to seal up the floor. But before I do that, I'm just going to test it to make sure that it all works. You can hear it priming. Beautiful. Fires right up. It is a tiny bit louder than the standard pump, but honestly, when I fit these pumps to most cars, you can't even hear them. So that's all good. We'll chuck the covery thing back on, and that's it. Fantastic. This is all done. I'm going to throw the trade plate on it. I'm going to get changed, and then we're going to head to Vic Roads and get this thing registered. Awesome. We're back. Car is registered. Even called on the drive back and got the car insured, and even gave it a full tank of 98. So happy days. The car actually drives fairly well. That was the longest drive this thing's ever done. It was about 110k round trip, because the closest Vic Roads is about 45 k's away from here. So yeah, let's change it. So plan is now I want to try and get this thing as much done on this, so when it comes time to pull the engine out, it's just engine trans out, engine trans in, plug a few things in, connect a few pipes and hoses, and sort of like away we go type scenario. So I'm actually going to start laying in the wiring harness. So we've got the standalone Barra wiring harness here. It's got its own little fuse and relay box here. We've got a main earth cable here. We've got wires that go to the back of the car. So our blue wire is our reverse light trigger. The red wire is our fuel pump trigger. This 2-core wire here is actually for an ABS sensor, which this car doesn't have ABS, so that's going to be interesting. We've got our main power to power everything, our plugs that go to the ECU and the engine. And then down here, we've got plugs that go to other stuff. So this goes to our shifter, the BA Tiptronic shifter, which again, I want to try and retain the AU shifter, so I don't know how that's going to work. We've got our OBD plug down there. We've got our OBD plug. That goes to our electronic throttle pedal. And then we've got a couple of wires that go to the ignition switch. So we've got engine cranking and ignition triggers. So blah, blah, blah. And I've also got the gauges as well. So I've got the boost gauge and the air fuel ratio gauge on this little thing that I've whipped up. So I want to basically try and get the wiring harness laid into the car, get all of the connectors run to where they're going to need to go. If I can connect anything that's not going to stop this thing being a running, driving car, we'll do that. I want to get the gauges mounted as well. So I'm basically just going to start hooking in, start taking a few interior trims and stuff apart, start laying in this harness. Ideally, I want to try and put this fuse and relay box inside the car because it's not waterproof. It was in the engine bay on the donor car, which is probably not the best. But yeah, look, that means we're going to have to pass these big connectors through the firewall. So yeah, I don't know how exactly I want to do this. I'm just going to start hooking in and I'll show you what I come up with. So you know that old song, you can't always get what you want? Well, that's basically what's happened here. I've ended up having to mount the fuse and relay box up in that top corner. Putting it under the dash, trying to get these connectors through wasn't going to work just because of how much length that is on these plugs for the engine and the ECU. They're just not long enough. So it was just going to be too hard. So we've put it there. We might try and make a cover or something for it. Basically, I've started running wires around the bay sort of to roughly where they need to go. The main wire that powers that whole scenario goes down and picks up wire off the starter motor. So I've dropped that wire down and just sort of tied it up for now. Then there's other wires that sort of I've cable tied across the back of the firewall. The O2 sensor plug is just hanging there. Then these wires are sort of just kicking across here for now. And one of those goes to thermo fans and one of them goes to the alternator. So I want to tidy them up, sort of run them and route them sort of roughly where they need to go. And then we'll work on mounting the earth wire, getting an earth point, tuck these out of the way for now. And then all of this stuff needs to go into the cabin. So they've all got to go under the dash, these black ones, and these ones need to go to the back of the car. So yeah, we'll just keep going. All right, so we've powered ahead with this, and I think engine bay side of things for now is pretty much done. Got everything sort of routed up and back across the back of the firewall that needs to go down to this side. I've got our alternator wire just sort of tucked up there. As I said before, our power wire that's going to pick up off the starters tucked down. I've got these two cables here that go to the engine harness and ECU that are sort of just going to hang out there for now, because we'll probably end up mounting the ECU somewhere around there. All of the wires that need to go into the car are in the car. I did have to drill a small hole in the firewall with a hole saw. It was either that or pull the dash out to get the cable in, which I didn't want to do. So I've ordered a big grommet to seal that up. And now we're going to start routing. I think that those blue and red wires that go all the way to the back of the car, I think that will be the next job. Alrighty, so the wires that need to go to the boot, I've removed the sill covers and passed it behind the kick panel under the covers, under that cover, under the back seat, and they just sort of hang out in here right now. What I'm going to do next is, as I said before, this red wire is our trigger for our fuel pump. So that'll just sort of hook in to that part of the loom, sort of in there to the power wire for the pump. And I marked it before when I was doing the fuel pump. It's a black wire with a yellow trace. These ABS wires, yeah, I don't know what I'm going to do with them. They'll probably just hang out for now. And this blue wire, I'm going to find where the reverse light trigger wire is, and then I'll tap this into that, and I might as well do that now. So yeah, we'll just do that. Reverse wire to the tail light harness is actually on the driver's side. It's back here, and it's this guy here. It's the red wire with the black trace. So I'm going to extend that blue wire, run it around the back, and I'm going to tap into that wire. Then back here's done. So we're on the tail end of the wiring side of things now. Got everything passed through to the driver's side that needs to be on this side. We've got a couple of wires here. We've got a starter motor trigger and an ignition trigger that need to go to the ignition barrel wires, which are in here. Major setback though, this is our wiring harness for our electronic throttle pedal, and during the course of passing it through, the flopping connector pulled out. So great. So I don't know how I'm going to get my head around that now, but anyway, we'll see what we can do. The OBD plug is just sort of tucked up in here for now, so I can stay next to the factory OBD plug for the car. It's been hours. I've been on this thing way longer than I wanted to be. Because of that accelerator plug, what I ended up doing is pulling half of the loom back out to access where the extension wires they've used essentially tap into the main loom to find the original colors. So they've just used like 7 core, so there's 7 wires that go into the accelerator pedal plug, and they've used like a 7 core wire to extend wires. So trying to find a pin out online, obviously the colors aren't going to correspond. So I ended up tracing all of those extended wires back to the main original harness. And out of the 7 wires, I've been able to find 5 of the original colors that match up with the pin out. So I figured I'll repin that plug eventually at some stage. I'll just guess on the last 2, and if it doesn't work, if I swap them, theoretically it should work. So that's that. So now we can go through and put like intake and everything back on and finish putting the inside of the car back together. One more job I want to try and knock out before I end this episode, essentially, and that is I want to try and figure out how I want to mount the ECU into the car. So I've got a factory BA ECU bracket here. Normally these go to the strut tower on those 2 mounts there, so sort of like back there, but obviously it's going to be too far across and way too high to fit in an AU. So I'm just going to have a little bit of a muck around to see how we can go around trying to mount this in a fairly okay manner. But first things first, I'm going to have to pull this intake off. I've got all the factory intake stuff off, and I've just banged that pod filter pipe on that I was using when the turbo motor was in the Commodore. It's sucking in some beautiful stinking hot air straight off the exhaust manifold. It's only temporary. We're planning on pulling this motor out in the next week or 2, and I'm going to be not driving this car as much, but just so it's not driving on unfiltered air, that'll just do for now. So now we can start mucking around with this stuff. So that's it, guys. We are done under the bonnet for today. We're basically done with this car in general for today. So got that ECU mounted. This is how it turned out. I just had to rejig the windscreen washer bottle and move it back a little bit, make up a little bracket for that so it sits further back. Then the factory BA ECU mount does fit into an AU, which is awesome. Got the ECU mounted to it, got that cable, that connector plugged into the ECU. So then we've just got this connector here, which plugs into that. And then this connector here plugs into the ECU in that port under here. Connect the power, and that should be it as far as wiring goes. So that's good. We got our gauges in too. This is our boost gauge reference, which is just going to be tucked down there for now. And I just sort of screw the gauges into the front of the center console. They look like that, and they're just wired up to accessories. Obviously, they don't read anything at the moment because the wideband O2 is not plugged in, and the boost reference is not connected to anything. So since you saw this last, nothing's changed with the exception of I got like a $20-something catch can off eBay. Very, very China. And I've just mounted that. It's just going to have one inlet, which comes from this breather hose off the rocker cover, which currently just tucks down there. So that's the only thing that's changed. Besides from that, the AU itself is untouched. I'm going to finish prepping this motor for install. The only thing that's left that I need to do on this is the engine mount bracket on the driver's side, which is on this side, is missing, but I need to pinch it off this engine when you get this engine out. And I'm going to have a little bit of a faff around with coolant pipes, or in specifically heater pipes. So on BAs and BFs and stuff like that, the heater core is on the driver's side, it's over here, and on the AU, it's back here. And I jumped online to Grant Walker Parts, and you can still get, for really, really cheap, surprisingly, the standard AU steel heater pipes. So this is the one that goes on this side, and this one here is the one that goes on the driver's side. These are quite different to the BA ones. BA ones, the passenger side one kicks across to the driver's side, and the driver's side one sort of goes back there, whereas these ones, the one for the driver's side wraps around the back of the engine and comes onto this side. And the passenger side one ends up stopping sort of back here somewhere. The issue is though, these being the turbo heater pipes, they do have the outlets for the turbo feed and return for the coolant, so which obviously these ones don't have. So I don't know if I'm going to use these. I'm going to have a little bit of a play around, and I'll let you know how I go. Alrighty, heater hose pipes are done. By the way, in case you're wondering why I've chosen to do this, you can like cut the standard lines that are on the Barra engines to run the AU lines on them. I have a friend of mine that did that actually in an EL, and he kept having issues with the heater hose popping off the heater pipe, and then he put a couple of dots of weld on the pipe to stop it from popping off, which fixed that. But then it involved having a fat heater hose going around the back of the engine to the firewall. It ended up chafing through, so I just wanted to this is the way I've chosen to do it, but there's more than one way to do it. You can do it however you like, and the way I did it was very difficult, so I probably don't recommend you doing it this way. But long story short, this pipe is in, fitted straight into there. This bracket on the side here was on here, so I've cut that off, welded it onto there, picks up on that mount on the manifold just to give that a bit of support, goes through here. I'll get back to this in a second. On this side, we've got the AU pipe that goes into the back of the water pump down there, runs behind the back of the manifold. There's a mount down there which picks up on the standard mount, which fits. There's another P-clip mount down here which fits onto the exhaust stud, goes around the back of the engine and goes back around down to there so the standard heater hose can connect. Then the hard line that goes onto the side of the turbo down here, that goes forward normally. I've taken that off, it now runs back to this rubber hose, a little bit of thin coolant hose back here, goes down to this T-piece. So we've got a bridge line running between the two heater pipes, which you do need, and then we've essentially got turbo coolant feed, turbo coolant return. In case you're freaking out thinking, oh, there's too many T-pieces and too many joins and whatever, it's essentially the same setup as what it is from factory, except this joint is normally down here, and this joint is normally on the other side at the front of the engine down there. So it's just everything is all here now. It's all in the one spot, and it will be hidden down there. You won't even see it once everything's in the car. Cool? Cool. Sweet. Hopefully you don't lash out at me for doing it this way. Next step we're going to do is move on to doing a couple of small coolers. So not the intercooler. I was also faffing around with the exhaust earlier as well. I've changed the flange on the end to suit the flanges that I keep in stock. And also this whole section of the exhaust pipe was flattened off to clear the steering rack in the Commodore. And I'm just presuming it's going to fit in the AU. So I just basically cut that out, got another bit of 3-inch pipe and welded that in so it's not as crushed. This was the transmission cooler that he was using when it was in the Commodore. I'm now going to use that as a power steering cooler. And I've got this slightly bigger Davies Craig one, which I kept in stock as well. we're gonna use that as a transmission cooler. So I'm gonna get both of these mounted up on the front of the car. I've got some extra heat, transmission cooler hose and stuff there as well if we need it. But I reckon I'm just gonna pop the grill out and try and get these mounted. So looking in the nose of this thing, so this steel tube down here is the factory power steering cooler. And the reason why I'm going to put an aftermarket power steering cooler on it is that's going to get in the way of where our intercooler is probably going to go. So I'm going to try and mount the transmission cooler and power steering coolers in this area somewhere at the top. So then we open up enough, like more room down the bottom for the intercooler. I might even see if I can move the horn or something. We'll see. So yeah, stand by. I'll see how I go. Alrighty, got both of those coolers on. The one that was a transmission cooler, that's now a power steering cooler. I gave it a lick of black paint. The factory power steering cooler pipe is gone. The brackets are still there, but we'll move them later. And also the horn I've relocated to the top of the front bar Rio. So your power steering cooler pipes or hoses go down the side there. There is a straight barb fitting there. It goes onto the factory pipe. And then the other line goes up to the power steering reservoir. Yes, I've connected it. I am using this car as a daily. It's currently Friday. I need to use this car on the weekend. So come next week when we pull the motor out, all I've got to do is just pull that hose off. Transmission cooler's there, and the hoses just run through and are curled up there on the side for now. So we've got 4 bolts going through the top. I've just cut them short so they look a bit better. And later on, once we get the bar off to do the intercooler, we will try and work on a mount for the bottom. Cool. That's done. That's going to do us, guys. We've gone pretty much as far as we can on the AU with getting it set up for the turbo Barra engine while still keeping it a running and driving car. There's still a couple more little things that we need to do to it before the motor goes in, but those things will make it not run and drive anymore. So we'll do them in the next video, as well as putting this thing in. So if you want to see more content like this, please remember to like and subscribe. And until I see you guys in the next video, be good to yourselves and each other.